This is the second part of my answer to the question, what have you learnt from your audience feedback? This is going to be answering the question regarding my film magazine. To start with, I created my masthead and a film reel to go behind it because I wanted my magazine to look a bit different from typical convention. When I posted this on Facebook, I got mixed views and mixed feedback. A lot of people liked the film reel. They thought it was different, it was original, and it looked really good, which I'm glad as it took forever to make. But they weren't too sure about the font, the masthead font. Originally, when picking this font, I was aiming for sort of a 1920s box office cinema style font. But because this wasn't sort of a conventional font to pick, my target audience and the people who gave me feedback on Facebook, they didn't really like it. Now for my final product that I've created, I have changed the font. I've made it into a bolder, more conventional font and got rid of the whole 1920s theme idea. But I did keep the original font, the 1920s style font, throughout a few of my drafts, but throughout every bit of feedback on the new set of drafts, there was always a comment, a negative comment regarding the masthead font. So I learnt from my audience feedback that for my end product I needed to change this. I needed to make it more conventional, which I did. The next bit of feedback I got was on a draft I created in PowerPoint. Now this draft, it was only sort of the rough layout of what I was going to do, and it didn't include any cover lines yet, but I still thought I'd get some feedback on it, rather than completing a full draft and then having to change loads of things. So the feedback that I got for this initial really rough draft was that the masthead font, again, wasn't the right font to use, but I've already touched on this already. And then another piece of feedback was talking about the space I've left at the bottom of the page underneath the exclusive area and the transfixed article. And although I hadn't added the cover lines onto this draft, which I was planning on doing, this audience feedback about the space at the bottom of the page sort of highlighted to me that I did need to fill it with more than I was already going to fill it with. And this is when the picture box came about. So I added this picture box because originally I was just going to have one or two cover lines down there and then the banner at the bottom. But after my audience feedback said that I didn't need to leave as much space at all, then I added the picture box just to take up more room. The next set of audience feedback I got was on a draft that I created again in Photoshop, but this time I'd added the cover lines on and the picture box. I got some feedback on this and it was mainly positive. There wasn't anything that was really highlighted that needed improving. So this feedback really told me that I was on the right track and that what I was creating was something that my target audience would actually like. After taking the photograph for the cover of my film magazine, I then put it onto the layout I'd already created on PowerPoint, and then I got some audience feedback on it. And although only 2 people replied to my Facebook status, both were very positive in their feedback. My first friend Jake, he said that it scared him, or rather he used some quite different explicit words, but basically it meant that he'd been scared by the cover image. So I thought that this was a pretty positive thing, seeing as my picture was meant to depict the horror genre. And then my friend Danny said that it looked really good. So I learnt from this feedback that I didn't have to make any major changes and that I could transfer this into Photoshop from PowerPoint and then manipulate it a bit more and hopefully make it a bit better. My media class then gave me feedback for my magazine as well as my other 2 media products. And the main feedback for the magazine was quite positive, and they said that they really liked the fonts that I've been using, and they liked the film reel behind my masthead because it was really unusual, and they liked the choice of photograph that I'd taken for the front of my magazine. But again, the issue of the masthead font came up, and so by this point, after hearing people disliking it so much, I decided that it was the point to change it, which I have done, which I've previously talked about. This feedback was pretty positive, and apart from adding an image in the picture box at the bottom of my magazine, there wasn't any massive changes that were highlighted by my audience feedback. So I learned that I was on the right track for my magazine and I didn't have anything drastic to change. The last piece of feedback I received for my magazine was from my media teacher, and I learned from this piece of feedback that I needed to add a banner or some words above my masthead just to sort of frame the masthead and to stick to the convention of film magazines. So I made this change, and I think it really does look good now, and it really frames the masthead. And I also changed the colour of my tagline from red to white, just so that again it frames the masthead. So overall I feel again I learned a lot from my audience feedback on my magazine, because if I hadn't have received the feedback I did, I probably would have stuck with my original masthead font, which I personally liked, but now I see that my new masthead font is much more conventional and does look a lot better. So I'm glad that I got the audience feedback that I did.